So here we are, another Tuesday, Greg.
Hey, Keith, good to see you again.
Yeah, so this is actually it's episode number 5. I can't believe it.
Wow.
We're really flying.
It does. Time goes fast. Time goes
Oh,
fast.
it really does. So, what's interesting is that the last two uh sessions that we had on starting a business actually took 2 sessions. We probably could have done 3 or 4, and there's so much to cover. But as you and I were talking this week regarding, your experience with buying a franchise and my experience with being a franchisor, that there's a lot to talk about. So what I wanted to do is I really wanted you to just ask me questions regarding, I want you to ask me about my experience as a franchisor, and then I want to understand from you how you went about buying a franchise and why you bought a franchise, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. So Keith, tell a little bit about when you were the franchisor, kind of what things were really important to you as you were looking for franchisees.
It's interesting, but in order to do that, I want to give a little bit of background about how I even became a franchisor.
That would be helpful.
Yes, what drove me to that insanity. So, um, as an entrepreneur, my whole life, I always saw myself as building a big business. My eyes were very big. It's like being hungry in a smorgasbord. You go in, you want to eat everything. And that's how I've been in business. And so when I was young, I was really hungry. And so I went to school to be an optician, okay, which is somebody who makes glasses, fits glasses, as opposed to the optometrist who actually examines eyes. And I went into my first business. I had 2 partners, and I then went out on my own, started my own eyeglass store.
Sure.
And that was what propelled me into the business in a much larger way. And I expanded much too quickly, but nevertheless, I did. I opened up 6 stores in less than 5 years. Non-franchise, though. These were all
Right.
startup.
They're all your stores.
All my stores started from scratch. Did not buy a brand. I started my own brand. As a matter of fact, it was called Eye Supply.
I like
And
that.
an interesting way, and I always like to tell interesting stories, say, well, how did you come up with that name, Eye Supply? So my wife and I are sitting, I live in Long Island, New York, and we were sitting, we had parked, and we were thinking about what name could we call the business? So she looks across the street and she sees a sign that says Beauty Supply. And she says, how about Eye Supply? Damn, that's good. And that birthed Eye Supply. And so you see,
It does have a nice ring to it.
yes, it's short, sweet, and to the point.
Mhm.
So, and this goes to, how do you build a brand? So we opened our first location in 1985, and it was hard. I mean, it was really because what did I know about starting a business from scratch? I mean, I had no knowledge in anything other than sales. Okay, not even like marketing, because I hadn't owned the business yet. So
Right.
I'm learning on the fly, and I'll making whatever mistakes I'm going to make, and I'll just learn. My wife, thankfully, is very conservative, and so she was managing, the back office operations, and I enjoyed it, and I loved selling. I always did, and I was, this was my business, and I got to meet customers, and the business grew slowly, but for some crazy reason, and my impatience, which Greg, you've experienced yourself, is I'm looking for my second store. I'm not even making money in my first store. I'm looking for my second store. If you were my CFO or my controller, you would have been hitting me over the head saying, what are you doing? What are you doing? Well, needless to say, I didn't have that. Now, my wife was looking at me like I'm crazy, but I was like a bull in a china closet. You know, you couldn't stop me. I was raring to go. Here I am. Let's see, I was 28 years old, you know, and I wanted to build a big business and I was in a rush. So nevertheless, I wound up opening my second store about a year later, maybe a year and a half later, and opened up 4 more within the next 3.5 years. And it was hard. I mean, but what I did, which was smart, I did take on working partners in those locations.
Okay.
Expand, hoping that I'll hire an employee who rarely has, you know, that same desire or work ethic that an owner will have. They have nothing on the line. I mean, they basically are just, you know, they're workers. Okay, I'm not disparaging workers. I'm just saying that
No, absolutely not.
you
No.
just don't know. You don't know, and you don't want to have a lack of
But
consistency.
it's a different mindset, right? When you're a business owner versus an employee, it's a totally different mindset.
No question about it. So, so I had made this decision, and what I would do is, you know, I would either I took someone who was working for me, okay, and took them on as a partner where they had to buy into the business, or I ran ads looking for partners, and it was pretty successful. It was. I didn't need to go any further than 6 stores, okay, because my first store started to make money, was able to help the other stores.
Right.
It wasn't enough for me. I needed more. Hence, I said, you know, why don't I franchise? You see how successful McDonald's and Burger King and all these other big names. And there were other eyeglass brands that also had franchised. They're probably mostly East Coast brands you'd never heard of, like Cohn's Fashion Optical or Sterling Optical. I don't know if they got into your neck of the woods.
Sterling Optical.
Yeah.
Certainly, yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, I was trying to, you know, copy successful methods, you know, and the problem was when you start to franchise, and I did a lot of things right. I hired a franchise company that actually helped me build the whole franchise model, including operations models, policies, procedures, and all the different things you have to do. I created, you know, a typical size store, a design, everything a franchisor is supposed to do. The problem is my when I started to sell franchises as a new franchisor, without enough brand recognition, it was difficult to get the kind of people I needed, people with the right amount of money. So I wound up finding a finance company that would finance my franchises by me, you know, referring qualified franchisees. Again, so not only was I undercapitalized, my franchisees were undercapitalized. So needless to say, when you start franchising and expanding rapidly, within like 3 years, I was up to like 17 locations. So I'm running crazy, but again, you know, it's not good. Not good. It's just I think that's being kind. It was quite overwhelming. And I needed things I didn't have. Okay. Which brings me to I did both sides. I started without a franchise, then I built a franchise company. So
Right.
and I've told you my finance problem. So I'm sure you have questions in that area too. But instead of you asking me those questions, I have questions for you,
Sure.
finance side. So have what I gave you was, you know, the 50,000-foot view of the things I made mistakes. So what would you tell, you know, a 28-year-old Keith about how to go about the financing funding of the business so that I wouldn't have run afoul as I did?
Sure. And I think, you know, we've talked previously, Keith, about how important it is for somebody who's going into business to really have a plan in place, right? and understand how they're going to build the business, what the needs are going to be over those first 3, 6, 9, 12, 18 months. And then once you have that plan and you can look at it and you can start putting dollars to some of those initiatives, you start to get an idea how much money you're going to need as you start this business up. Now, whatever you come up with, you probably should multiply by 2 because you're missing things as you go through that. But the idea is to make sure that again, however it is you're starting the business, whether it's a franchise or whether you're just starting your own non-franchise business, having that plan and then being able to associate the costs and the expenses related to implementing that plan, and then understanding, do I have enough money to do this or do I not? And if you've got enough money to do it, great. If that's, if you have money sitting in your savings account and you can do that, awesome. If you don't, and most business owners don't, then you've got to start getting creative about where am I going to pull funds from to be able to finance this business as it's getting started and as it's growing.
Yeah. It's so funny because, when I talk to people, in after, almost 40 years since I was 28, now I'm 66, it seems so logical. I mean, everything you say is like, I needed, and this is where mentorship comes in. We're not going to cover mentorship today because I think it's a great topic, but I do want to cover it in our future talks. I think logically I knew a lot of things, but experience-wise, I didn't. It makes perfect sense to not, be undercapitalized.
Right.
But what I didn't know was, which I know today, is, how to put together even, a pro forma projection, with every cost, that you have, and then working, as you just said, if you think you're gonna do X, cut that in half and then cut in half again. Okay, because you have to prepare yourself that you're so far off on your projections, or you run out of money and you can't do the things that drove the business.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, which gets into a whole subject of, debt versus equity. Do I take on a partner who brings in cash, which I did before I franchised. Okay, and that was really the right model. I should have stuck with that model because the person was much more vested financially because they had to come up with more money than they did with my franchise. So,
Keith, you mentioned something there. I think that's important is there's sometimes an opportunity to take on a partner in your business, right? Whether it's at startup or maybe you're established and you're looking to grow to that next level. And I think there can be a lot of advantages to that, right? It might be somebody who brings, can bankroll some of your growth. It's also somebody who can take some of the workload off, I would think. There's downsides as well, and that is now you do have a partner. So when it comes to decision making, you have to be prepared to compromise or discuss or work with somebody, in a way that you can come to an agreement on. Here's the decisions we're going to make that are really key for the business. I think it's important if you're going to bring out a partner that it's somebody you can work with and have a good relationship with. Doesn't mean you have to agree all the time, but you have to be able to work through your differences and get to resolution on issues.
yeah, I agree, and I've been on both sides. So in these partnerships that I took on, they were the working partner. So that was advantageous from a relationship perspective. Because look, when you take on somebody who you don't know that well and you're spending every day together, it can be, it's like having a marriage that you never met them. It's like it was an arranged marriage, and that's somewhat what it is if it's not someone you were working with or when you take on a partner. So there's good and bad to both sides, but financial and the emotional burden was much removed by having someone who, one, came in with money, and two, worked the business on a daily basis and ran it. So I think that was, again, a good model. The franchise model, and I think the franchise model is fantastic. Okay, all I'm saying is that I did not do it properly. Okay, because of the same thing I said earlier, impatience and lack of experience. And the impatience, I didn't need 17 locations to be successful.
You know, Keith, you're being pretty hard on yourself, and I know you look back and you say, hey, there's a lot of things I did that maybe I shouldn't have done. But the one thing I really think that comes through as you talk about this is your passion and your entrepreneurialism that that I can just tell comes through as you talk. And those things can make up for a lot of mistakes or errors along the way. So what I would say to somebody starting their business is, boy, if you have passion and you have some entrepreneurship experience, or you just have that knack, that can overcome a lot of the blocking and tackling that maybe you're not as comfortable doing or as familiar with.
Yeah, I thank you, and I agree with you. And the reason and of course I'm being hard on myself, but for two reasons. One is I want our audience, I want people listening to this to understand that no matter how successful you are, you don't get to success without failure. It just doesn't happen. I mean, you're going to fall down. And if you don't believe that, then don't go into business. Because you really, not every day is great. Not every month, not every year. So you have to have the stomach for business. Okay. It's even if you lack experience early on, but you have passion, desire, and intestinal fortitude, that goes a long way.
And a vision, a vision for what you're trying to create.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
that's, I think that's really the message more than, oh, I failed. Big deal. I say big deal because guess what? I don't know what I know now without the failure.
Absolutely.
Okay? And if you talk to any entrepreneur on any level, from the beginning entrepreneur to someone who's become a billionaire, they'll tell you about their failures. Everybody sees them when they're at their billionaire status. They don't know what they were doing, working 7 days a week, okay, losing money or out of money, and can't pay. My wife and I couldn't pay the groceries for a month. Okay. I mean, that's when we first started out. But we took the shot. Okay. It was us. We said we're young. We didn't have kids at the time. And by the way, I think that's the best time to, if you're early in your career and you're not in that place, those are the times to take those risks. Of course, I took risks even after I had kids, but that's just my nature. I mean, but I would say that as time went on, you become really good at the things you weren't good at, which is knowing I need an accountant, knowing I need to see numbers, that I need to understand what a budget looks like. They need to understand if I'm overspending.
Right.
Okay. I not only do it's not that I can't figure that out on my own. I don't want to.
Right.
Okay. Why should I do something I'm not good at and avoid something that I'm good at? That doesn't make good business sense.
I really think you're hitting on something there, Keith, that so many business owners who I've spoken to through my coaching business have said, I had this idea for a business. I had a passion for it. I really wanted to do this, but I didn't realize how many other things there were that went along with business ownership that I don't like doing. And just as you pointed out here, there's a lot of things that go along with owning your own business, and you have to figure out how to get those things done. And you may not be the best person to be doing them, but for a period of time, you might have to.
Right.
But you really want to be able to identify those things and see if there isn't a way to get those off your plate so you can really focus on the things that got you excited about getting
Correct.
into your own business.
Correct. Because it's, it's very easy to know what you're good at. Okay.
Right.
Knowing what you're not good at is even more important.
I agree.
That's the only way you stay out of trouble. It's like you don't want to be running into a burning building when you're not a firefighter.
Right.
So
Right.
and that's the love of entrepreneurship, which I do. I mean, I think I exude that in terms of what I believe and the kind of life that it gives you. Because the freedom you have as an entrepreneur, even in the worst of times, is still better than a 9-to-5 job. Where it's like, I don't care. You could have the best job in the world, pays you, a good salary. At the end of the day, it's not yours. Okay. You're dealing with somebody else's problems, somebody else's moods, somebody else's, whatever's going on in their world. And, you have other employees, you don't control them. You may know, like you sit there and go, why is this person hired? They're lazy, they don't do their job, they create more work for everybody else, and the boss doesn't see it. And yet it's not your business, so you're sitting there going, well, if this was my business, I would never put up with that.
Well, and I think you're touching on something again, Keith, about business ownership, and that is, it isn't for everybody. You identified yourself as being somebody who was willing to take risks. You were willing to kind of put yourself out there. You had this passion. You knew that there were things you didn't know, but you moved forward anyway. I think there are people who are just not cut out to be business owners because they don't have those attributes. And I would just caution somebody who has that, who's risk averse, who's maybe doesn't have that entrepreneurship, that visionary idea, really step back and really evaluate whether, starting the business is right for you. Because what we want people to start business who are business owners, but we don't want everybody to start a business because, again, some people do have to be the employees, some people do have to be the workers, and some people, that's where they're most comfortable at. There's nothing wrong with that, as you indicated before. But I think I can tell when you talk, you just have that passion, that drive. And I think if I didn't know you and I met you for 5 or 10 minutes, I would come to the conclusion that you probably had owned a business at some point in your career.
Yeah, listen, thank you again. Okay, you see what I feel, and part of that is why I'm good at sales, because I'm able to have the passion and show the passion and the care to somebody I'm selling, so that they want to do business with me. I mean, that's really what business is all about, is that you have clients.
Right.
And how do you communicate with your clients?
Yes.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And you want to, not only do you want to provide them with a good experience, but you really want to help them, whatever it is that you're doing. In your case, the business of eyeglasses, you wanted them to walk out of your store with eyeglasses that they were proud to wear, right?
Yeah.
In my business, I want to help business owners move from where they're at to where they want to get to. And that's the passion that I have as I'm coaching clients. And I know the passion you had when you owned your stores was you wanted those customers walking out, shouting the praises of eye supply.
That's right. Look, I wanted them to look good, to feel good, and to basically, when people say, "Oh, where'd you get your glasses?" "Oh, Eye Supply, they're the best. You got to go there. They're wonderful," And that's really the same thing with you as a coach. I mean, it's like you want people to say, I just had an experience that was so rewarding, that, yeah, if you need
Want
a
to tell
coach,
you about it, right? right.
So as we get to the last few minutes, I want to ask you a question because you own a franchise, okay? A FocalPoint coaching franchise, which is very
Right.
well known around the globe.
Right.
So what made you buy a franchise versus starting from scratch?
Yeah, it's a really good question. You know, for me personally, it was I felt like having the franchise behind me gave me a lot of credibility. It gave me a lot of the resources I was going to need to get started. Training resources, coaching resources, marketing resources. And I felt like I had the money to be able to invest up front to do that. Now, if I had gone the non-franchise route, I still would have needed to do all those things. But you know, I would have had to do them on my own. Where here, I think the advantage from my standpoint of a franchise is, you know, I'm not reinventing the wheel, right? All these tools that are necessary to get started exist and are at my disposal to use. Plus, as I've said, there's hundreds of other coaches around the world that I can rely on as well, who also you know run under the FocalPoint flag. So for me, that's what really drove my decision making was I just felt like having those resources and that name recognition was really I really valued, and that was what ultimately drove me into that decision.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, the thing that you said is there's a couple of things that obviously I believe is very strongly, and that's why I did start a franchise company, is a system that's already proven and in place. Okay, that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can basically know from day one that all the pieces are there. When you start a business, if you had just started a coaching business, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And you would be, the learning curve would be so much greater, and maybe it would cost you a little less on the front, but the mistakes you make, okay, could be extremely costly, you know, as you go along. So there's, it's a very interesting question for those who are looking to go into business that have that entrepreneurial spirit of should I or should I not buy a franchise?
Well, and I think, Keith, the really key is there is no right or wrong answer as to whether to buy a franchise or start up your own business without going the franchising route. It really is an individual um, kind of thought process as to what you think makes the most sense. Certainly, the business you're going into might drive it a little bit. You know, if you were going to start a fast food restaurant, franchising is probably the way to go, right? There aren't a lot of fast food restaurants anymore that aren't franchises. But when you think of you think of like trades like an electrician or a plumber or somebody who's starting an HVAC company as an example. There are franchises in those areas because just about everything these days has been franchised. But you know, really looking at that business and understanding, okay, do I need to go that franchise route? Would that be the best way for me? Or would it be to just be, you know, Gregg's plumbing service? And I can get my business started that way. So lots of things, and we can talk about this more at a future podcast, but lots of things to consider when you're weighing those things, and we've just scratched the surface here today.
Yeah, that'd be great. And thank you. So, yeah, I think what we do need to cover in a future podcast would be uh cost comparisons. You know, maybe we take what it would take to open up a particular type of business. Today, the beautiful thing is like data is all over the place online. So getting this information would not be too difficult. But I think it'd be interesting to show the comparison. Say, okay, if I opened up a hamburger joint, it's not a McDonald's, okay, and given all the same things that I'd have to do in terms of, you know, infrastructure, build out, you know, leasing a place, that's a whole other animal. It's like, in the brick and mortar world, you have to actually find a location, okay, sign a lease, negotiate the lease.
Right.
And then you got to get into the build out of the location, depending upon what they're giving you. Is it, a square box, or is it something that was already there that you got to, knock down or make use of? I mean, it gets very involved. And, the best part, and then I'll leave everybody with this. The best part of everything I did early in my career is, as a coach now, I would venture to say there are very few people who have my overall experience. Like, I would not talk about finance as part of my coaching business. I would not be saying, well, I know that because I know how to use QuickBooks. I mean, I'm a finance. No, I'm not. I'm a sales and marketing coach, okay? I would say I major in sales and marketing. I'm sort of major in entrepreneurship, but I know what I'm good at.
Mhm.
Okay, and I think that's part of that decision-making process if you're going to buy a franchise or not, is what is your level of experience in business in general?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Really good point.
All right, so on that note, Greg, another good week with us.
Not only does time fly by on the weeks, but time flies by in the 30 minutes that we do these
Yeah,
podcasts.
it really does. We in the future we may have to go longer. If you could stand me for any longer. All right, Greg, and to our audience, thank you for stopping by, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Thanks for all your input today, Keith.